In today's video, we're going to be talking about Airbnb and long-term rentals. Which one is better? Stay tuned to find out. What's going on, everyone? My name is John Lee, and welcome to my channel where we talk all things money, real estate, entrepreneurship. I recently just bought my dream home, and I'm in the process of renovating the whole home. In fact, I am in the process of adding a suite to the basement, so I have an additional rental suite. Now, if you want to figure out what I decide to do with that suite, if I'm going to Airbnb it out for short-term rental or keep it as a long-term rental and find a good tenant that is long-term. Also, if you want to stay tuned and follow me along with the whole renovation journey, definitely don't want to miss out, so subscribe right now. Now, the question I get a lot of time is, why are some properties more suitable for short-term rentals and why are some properties suitable for long-term rentals? Why not do all of your investment properties in short-term or long-term? What are the pros and cons? How do you decide which way to go? What metrics do you look at? And that is exactly what we're going to be talking about in today's video. So let's go over the pros and cons of long-term rentals first. The pros and cons of long-term rental. The pros are, for long-term rental, less management, no furnishing required. Usually you can rent out a suite empty as it is, and you have consistent, predictable income. Normally, tenants would sign on for a period of 6 months, 3 months, or even up to a 1-year lease. And there's a very high chance that once they're in that space, they would stay on for longer. In Vancouver, it's on a month-to-month basis after their fixed-term contract expires. So, you have a peace of mind knowing that this is a good tenant. They have a proven track record of paying every month, and they keep the place really nice and tip-top condition. And also, I don't have to worry about any additional headaches, right? Also, you don't have to furnish the place. You can rent it out empty as it is, and usually the tenants would have their own furniture that they would bring along to kind of make the space their own. For long-term rental, the rent is the same every month, so you know when to accept the check. Usually it's at the first of the month, so you don't have to worry about when they're going to pay and when not to, when you don't have to constantly pester them for the next payment. Now let's switch gears and talk about the pros of short-term rentals. So obviously the biggest incentive is you have potentially higher income, and you have the ability to use that apartment space yourself as well, right? You can block off certain dates of the year for yourself and book it in so you can enjoy that space all to yourself. And it's a good way to kind of diversify your investments, so it's like less risky. And also with multiple tenants kind of booking the space, you really diversify the risk of your tenants not paying rent, which did happen a little bit. We're running into some of these issues, especially when we were at the peak of the pandemic. So a lot of tenants were squatting in the units and saying they can't afford to pay rent because the governments have put in a notice saying that you can't evict the tenants for the next few months, right? So that could be a problem if you have a long-term tenant who's squatting in there, whereas for short-term rentals, you have a number of tenants coming in and out on a monthly basis, and it diversifies your risk of, one tenant defaulting, not paying, you having to fork out the payments yourself, and it's kind of more spread out evenly throughout. Now, short-term rentals such as Airbnb, HomeAway, VRBO, if you rent a place out, you can make about $5,000 on average, whereas for a typical 2-bedroom condo, maybe if you have a long-term tenant, you're looking at about close to $2,000 to $2,500 depending on the location in Vancouver. So significantly more. You essentially can double the amount of rental income that you can make potentially by going short-term. But also you have to account for additional costs, right? So you have to pay cleaners to clean the place every few days right before the new tenants kind of move into that space. Don't forget about Airbnb fees because you're using their platform, so they can charge you a small piece of the pie to help you find potential bookers to book your space. Also, state fees as well. There could be state fees or city fees that you would need to have an Airbnb license. For example, if you're looking to Airbnb a place out in Vancouver here, you need a license. That would cost monthly on a monthly basis. You would also have insurance costs as well, usually for rental units. You would have additional insurance coverage on your place. And don't forget about furnishing costs, because now you're in charge of not only furnishing the space, but making it look impeccable so your space stands out amongst others, which would give people more of an incentive to book and stay over at your place. And furniture does add up, right? Especially if you're trying to make a theme around it, which, I'm in the process of doing that with my place. Michelle's definitely been a huge help with the whole process, from picking the paint color to the flooring tiles to what furniture pieces to kind of finish and complete that space. So definitely want to stay tuned with the whole process. You're going to learn a lot of gold nuggets with my own personal experience. Now, another thing is that, about short-term rentals is the ability to enjoy the space yourself, right? So if there was a destination that you constantly frequent, let's say Hawaii or Cancun in Mexico, and you own an Airbnb place there, how wonderful would it be for you to be able to enjoy that space yourself while making rental income when you're not there, right? It's amazing. And I think that's the biggest potential of short-term rental. And the way I look at it is I'm able to own many different unique properties in destinations that I love to frequently visit, and therefore I can have an accommodation that's already set aside for me when I go visit. Another thing to consider is with short-term rentals, you usually have a few different tenants every single month. And because they're staying on a short-term basis, you really don't have to worry about, again, collecting rent and, tenants defaulting. You're essentially spreading out your risk for collecting rental income. And ideally, you wouldn't have to run into a situation where if your tenant doesn't end up paying rent for a few months, you have to go through the lengthy process of giving them an eviction notice and going to the tenancy board as well and applying for this whole situation and getting them evicted or incentivizing them to move out, because usually people are there for a few days or a few months time, and that is the hassle-free that you get with short-term rentals compared to a long-term tenant. Now, let's talk about the cons. So the cons of long-term rental is evictions, as we just talked about. That is actually quite prominent, especially during tough times like this, throughout the pandemic. Tenants might not be able to pay rent or they're squatting. And it's frustrating because not only are your tenant's not paying you, you have to essentially pay for double the cost, because now you're paying the mortgage out of your own pocket, for example, if you have financing on a place, and you can't really utilize that space to the fullest. And if you go through the lengthy process of evicting the tenants, that would take a few months to kind of just get everything through the tenancy board. So that's another headache on its own. So there's lost revenue in that sense. Another thing to consider too for long-term rentals is if your tenants don't pay, you have to evict them. And if they damage your property, unfortunately, you have to be the one that cleans up after them and fixes up the damages that they've done. And also, you tend to get less revenue, right? Because with security, there's less risk, so you get less revenue. With short-term rentals, it's more risky, less security, so you have more income. And the last con that I really see is for long-term rentals, you're unable to really utilize that space yourself, right? So if you have friends and family that are visiting, for short-term rental, you can book off that space for them to use and occupy your suite. But if you have a long-term tenant in there, they're in there for months, for years, there's no chance that you can, utilize that space yourself. And that's kind of a bummer because, oftentimes you might just want more space, or your friends and family are visiting and you need a little bit more space and you just can't provide accommodation for them. Something to think about. Now let's go over the cons of short-term rentals. So for short-term rentals, because of the high turnover of tenants and the frequent shuffling of people going through your unit, there is definitely more management involved. And more management usually means more headaches. you have to furnish the place, but not only do you have to furnish it, you got to make it look apart. You got to make it look good so it stands out. So you definitely want to get an interior designer on board to help you really create the ambiance of that space. That's going to be another big thing. It's going to be a make or break. Last but not least, laws and regulations around short-term rentals and Airbnb units are constantly changing, and depending on the city that you're in, you have to be constantly up to date with this, because you don't want to be going around and doing things that are against the law. It just causes more headaches down the road. So that's another thing to worry about. Whereas for long-term rentals, genuinely, they're pretty straightforward with their policies, and it's quite a direct process to get everything through. With short-term rentals, you have bookings, you have questions that potential bookers are going to be asking you, and that you have to answer and deal with. You have to furnish it, you have to make it look approachable, you got to make it look clean, you got to make it look absolutely amazing. And you have to provide utensils, plates, pots, pans, towels, all the amenities and things that we're used to taking for granted when we stay over at a hotel. We do have to provide those things, right? Toothbrush, toothpaste, you name it, toilet paper, tissue paper. There's a lot more things to kind of think about when you are planning to do short-term rental. And with laws, again, in BC, in Vancouver, you would need an Airbnb license. So usually it just equates to you paying more fees for licensing and more taxes usually because you have a higher rental income. So you can't rent without letting your city know. And that's very important that you check with your city and their bylaws, because it's constantly changing. Last but not least, if you want to decide whether to do short-term rental or long-term rental, you have to look into a couple of key factors. And these are the metrics that I use personally to decide which one to use for what. First thing is laws and regulations. For example, in Vancouver, we need an Airbnb license to run it. There's a specific code that you have to have in order for you to put your listing up on Airbnb and to list out as short-term rental. And there's a whole approval process. They have to really check out the space and get it approved and certified and all of that, because without that, you can't legally run an Airbnb business. Second thing you want to look at is the return on investment. So, as we know, when you're considering doing a short-term rental suite, there are more costs associated. You have the licensing cost, you have more taxes that you're paying, more insurance that you're paying, you have to furnish the space, you got to spec it out, you got to provide utensils, you got to pay for utilities, gas, water, Wi-Fi, Netflix, all that. So there's really a lot more costs associated with running a short-term rental suite. So you really have to factor in the return on investment on your rentals to make sure that it's worth the extra headache, it's worth all the extra investment up front. Because if it's not, then you might be better off just putting your vacant unit on the market and to find a long-term tenant to move in there. So the last and final thing that I personally look at, and this is the most important for me, so pay close attention, is are you going to use that space yourself? Do you want to use the rental suite, right? So, or do you might have friends or family that frequently visit and they might need a space and accommodation to kind of stay in? That's really important, because that's essentially the biggest reason why I would consider getting a short-term rental suite is for my own selfish use, right? If, for example, I've always imagined that, if there's a vacation place such as Hawaii or New York or even Miami that I constantly frequent, to be able to own a vacation home there where I'm constantly generating income, but if I do want to visit for a few weeks or months, I can book a stay there and have a place to call home. I think that would be fantastic, right? But you really have to think about the amount of work that goes into managing those units, right? Every time you get into a new short-term rental suite in a new city, you have to create your team from scratch. You have to find the best cleaners, the best handymans, the best property managers, the best interior designers that will furnish the place. So a lot goes involved into finding these top-notch talents in different cities that are expanding. It's kind of like when you're owning like not one hotel, but multiple hotels spread out internationally. It's a lot of manpower that goes behind the scenes to help you manage. And personally for me, like if you run the calculations, it's just not worth it because the return on investment is there and it's very lucrative, but the amount of risk that I'm hedging and the amount of uncertainties that I'm dealing with, managing a property remotely from many miles away is not a feasible investment in my opinion. It's not a sound one because I'm taking on a lot of risk, right? And anytime things could go wrong, and you have to make sure you have people there to help you handle that situation. So if I were to expand on a new market for Airbnb, I would have to pick somewhere that I would frequently visit. Not only that, it would have to be somewhere that's within close proximity, meaning I could either drive to it within 1 to 2 hours or be able to fly to it within 1 to 2 hours. So, for example, in Vancouver, it would be maybe up in Kelowna, or if I'm flying, I would probably consider Calgary or Edmonton or Seattle maybe, right? So I want to make sure that I'm within close proximity and just a short flight or short drive away. But for the time being, I definitely want to make sure that it's within the proximity of at least half an hour to an hour driving wise, right? Because when you're just getting started off with this whole process, you want to go slow and steady. You don't kind of want to over leverage yourself and overstretch yourself out, unit by unit. And, let's see where this takes me. But I'm super excited to kind of be on this journey and to share it all with you. So would I consider Airbnb? I would really consider it to be more of an investment property, and more so looking from the return on investment point of view than the feasibility of me staying there, as a vacation home, right? Because to me, if I look at it purely from investment standpoints, I run the numbers. If it makes sense, if it's doable, then that's great. But if I factor in, the aspect of having a vacation home as well, then it makes things a little bit more complicated, and sometimes you don't make the best sound investment decision. With that being said, hope you guys have a great idea as to what the pros and cons of a short-term rental compared to a long-term rental. I know I'm personally going through that process myself, so that's why I figured I'd create this video to share it with all of you. Some food for thought, right? So let me know down in the comment section below if you currently own an Airbnb unit. Let me know what city you're in and why you chose that city. And if you're on the fence of starting an Airbnb business, let me know down below what city you would pick and why, and maybe, just maybe, I might consider investing in that city myself as well. So with that all being said, thank you guys for sticking to the very end. I really appreciate each and every one of you watching this video. If you found any value or found it entertaining, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel, and follow me on my other social media channels as well, where I drop a lot of good tips on real estate, finance, and money. Until next time, see you guys later. Bye.